Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Huska. I am a Caucasian male. I have dark blonde hair and blue eyes. I'm wearing a white shirt to kind of describe my environment. So the poster is over my right shoulder, and the whole background is the poster. Um, so a little bit about the poster specifically. The title and my name is in navy blue, a dark navy blue and bold. The titles are all in deep blue in bold, and the writing underneath it, um, and the bullet points are all in gray. There are two graphs in the upper right-hand corner. One is a pie chart with purple and blue, and the other is a bar graph with a comparative bar graph with orange and turquoise. I'll now begin my presentation. So, the title of my research paper and my poster is Gender Norms in Athletic Participation by Daniel Huska. Just a little introduction about the research itself. It examines how gender norms and structural inequalities shape sports participation for athletes. This research paper, in order to dial down the scope of research, is specifically focused on women in sports. And the gap that this research aims to promote further research to fill is research shows differences but does not quantify it and show how much. So there's a lot of qualitative data that says that there is a difference in participation rates for women in sports and across genders. But there's not any quantitative data that really says how much they're being affected. And the goal is to understand how environment impacts participation rates and participation as a whole. So the hypothesis for this study is sports participation enjoyment is significantly shaped by the interplay of structural inequalities and gender norms. And to dive in a little bit on the materials that were used, peer-reviewed articles published in 2020 and after. So they're recent articles, and this is super important because preferences and opinions change over time. So when trying to find research to kind of specify the field of study that I was looking for, I wanted to find things that were still relevant, things that were uh, still being found in recent years and not outdated. So they're still reliable. There's qualitative data. Examples of these are surveys and case studies throughout the research, and quantitative data. There's a couple different quantitative data that was collected, but participation rates is one example. And then methods. So mixed method approach, qualitative and quantitative data was both used. It's important to recognize that there's not a specific link to show how much. It kind of just the qualitative data or quantitative data just shows that it's there. Um, and qualitative data just show that there is an impact. We just don't know how much yet. And constructionalist framework was super important to the development of my research. So this research paper is based on the belief that gender is a socially constructed system and that there is separation between male and female and genders. So when focusing on women specifically, this research specifically just focused on women and not gender as a whole. So that's super important to the understanding and interpreting this data. Compared participation across different environments. So as we'll talk about in the findings a little bit, environment is super important to the preferences of individuals. So it's very notable when doing studies and trying to find and come to conclusions. So now looking at the graphs, to dive a little bit more into the research itself, the first graph is a pie chart. The It's and it's titled media coverage. So men's media coverage is in blue and it takes up 80%. The women's media coverage is much less, taking up 20%. And so this is super important because media frames the way individuals think. So being exposed to a lot of something or not enough of something contributes to people's opinions or desires. So that is really affecting women's desire to participate. Because when you aren't seeing yourself or seeing other women doing things on media, sometimes it's hard to envision yourself doing that same thing. So that was super important and something we look at and dive more in the research paper itself. And then jobs for men versus women. So this is a comparative bar chart. So the first category is labeled sports industry. The orange bar is for men. 70% of the sports industry jobs are for men, and in the turquoise, 30% are for women. In the other category, it's titled caretaking, and 50-50% is the distribution of men and women in the caretaking field. So this is really important because it shows the marginalization of women in the sports industry. And to kind of explain the significance of this, when there's not women being represented in this industry, it controls the amount of funding, support, and opportunities that other women are getting because they aren't properly represented in the field. So this is really notable when looking at marginalization of women and is a big telling factor as to why women are not participating as much as some may expect or as they should. So now to dive into the findings. Participation is not just personal choice. It is based on your personal experiences and the environment you're in. Limited opportunities is one big thing that might hinder women's desires to participate. And it's shaped by media, leadership, social expectations, and gender norms. So when in one of the studies, it talks about how people would categorize between men or women as to whether they or not they would participate in that given sport. So if individuals don't see themselves or aren't considered to be a part of something by society or by gender norms, they are less likely to participate. Inequality limits opportunities for women. This is really important. When women aren't receiving the same resources as men, it is hard to expect an equal amount of participation or trying to get closer to the equality that we desire between genders. And then limitations, it varies on environment. So when looking to do future studies, this is really difficult because it varies based on environment. As I said earlier, you need to people's opinions are based on their environment and the things that are around them and their personal experiences. So when trying to quantify this data, it is important to do it specified on environment and go to different places and do many different case studies to come to conclusions because you can't just do a country or a state as a whole because there's many different personal environments and personal experiences that take place. So it's to try to minimize the effects of um, a third factor. You must take in you must be very careful and do case studies. And then many studies rely on qualitative data. As I said before, attaining this quantitative data is very difficult. So a lot have in the past have relied on qualitative data. And the next steps, use more quantitative data, really try to narrow in the effects and study different environments more closely, just because of the effects that it has on people's preferences and the participation rates, and that relationship there. Now looking at the authors and the different research papers that I use to do my research, Chalet and others, Perceptions of Experience of Gender Generation Z in Sports, Michaela Duffer, Gender Marginalization in Sports Participation, Matthew Heineman, Gender Inequality and Sports Organizations, Ruth Jeans, Equity and Sports and in Community Sports Clubs, Women in Sports, Where All the Women, in Jinru Zhu and others, men's sports or women's sports. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you guys all for listening, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.